Smell of peonies and warm beeswax candles is what I remember most, more than anything anyone said that night. The ballroom at the Drake on Walton Street had been my mother's dream venue before she passed, and I had booked it 3 months ago with the kind of trembling reverence you reserve for sacred things. 240 white peonies hand-tied, a string quartet from the lyric opera, a 6-tier cake from that little bakery in Bucktown that takes orders 18 months out. Everything was supposed to glow. Everything was supposed to feel like the beginning of something I had waited my whole adult life for. Instead, I stood at the head of a long mahogany table, the train of my Monique Louis gown pooled around my satin shoes, and watched my future sister-in-law tap her champagne flute with a butter knife. Not a polite tap. A loud theatrical one, the kind that says everyone, "Look at me now. My name is Myrelle, and I am 31 years old. I am the chief operating officer of a private equity firm that manages about $400 million in assets. I bought my first investment property at 24. I bought the brownstone I currently live in with the man I was about to marry. I bought it with my own money in my name alone because the man I was about to marry, my fiancé, had asked me to. He said it would be easier for tax purposes. He said his accountant had advised it. He said we would sort it all out after the wedding. I had said yes. I had said yes to a lot of things in the 7 months we had been engaged. The future sister-in-law, my fiancé's older sister, stood up in a champagne-colored gown that she had told me at the bridal shower was not technically white, so it should be fine. She was 42, recently divorced, currently living in our brownstone's guest suite, until she got back on her feet. And she had a smile on her face that I had only ever seen on people about to deliver bad news while pretending it was good news. "Before we eat," she said, her voice carrying easily across the ballroom, because she had positioned herself directly in front of the string quartet, who had stopped playing without being asked. "I want to do something a little different, something our family does, a tradition." I looked at my fiancé, who was sitting to my left in a custom Brunello Cucinelli tuxedo I had paid the deposit on. He was looking at his plate. He was not looking at me. That should have been the first thing I noticed. It was not. The future sister-in-law went on. She talked about how every woman who married into their family received what she called the welcoming. She said it was beautiful. She said it was about lineage, about belonging, about making the new bride feel truly part of something larger than herself. The guests, 60 of them, my closest friends and a great many of his family members I had met only once or twice, made the small approving sounds people make when they think they are witnessing a touching moment. I made no sound. I had stopped breathing somewhere around the word welcoming. I did not know why. Something in my body knew before my mind did. She produced from behind the head table a thick cream-colored envelope, the kind that comes from a stationer who charges by the letter. She opened it. She unfolded a piece of paper that had been printed on what looked like vellum. "These are the responsibilities," she said, "that the new wife in our family accepts on her wedding day. They are not legally binding, of course. They are something deeper than law. They are family. I want you to understand something. I want you to understand that until that moment I genuinely believed I was about to hear something sentimental. A poem maybe. A blessing. A list of small, quaint rituals about lighting a candle on certain Sundays. I was, as it turns out, an idiot. First," she said, and she lifted the paper a little higher. "The new wife will assume the role of family bookkeeper. This means managing the household accounts not only of her own home, but of the matriarch and patriarch, my parents, and assisting with their quarterly tax preparations as we transition them into retirement. Our mother has done this for 38 years. It is time for the next generation." A pause. A small, indulgent laugh from someone at the back. Probably an aunt. The aunt who, I would later realize, had been studying me all evening the way an appraiser studies an estate sale. "Second," she said, "the new wife will take over Sunday hosting. This is a meal for not less than 14 people, weekly, prepared in the family home. The menu has been kept consistent since my grandmother, and there is a binder. I will provide the binder." I felt my fingers go cold. Not warm cold. Cold like I had put my hand in a freezer. Third, the new wife will be responsible for the personal scheduling of my parents, their medical appointments, their travel, their social calendar. Our mother has expressed that she is looking forward to letting this go. And as the next woman of the house, our new sister will be a great gift to her in this transition. The next woman of the house. I had never been called that. I had never agreed to be called that. I had a corner office. I had a personal assistant of my own. I had a passport full of stamps from cities where I'd closed deals while wearing heels that cost more than this woman's grocery budget. Fourth, she said, and now I could hear something underneath her voice, something almost gleeful. The new wife will commit to a minimum of 2 children, with the understanding that within our family, the mother is the primary caregiver, and outside professional commitments are deprioritized accordingly. We are traditional people. We are proud of that. A man somewhere coughed. A glass clinked. Someone whispered. I turned my head slowly, to look at my fiancé. He was still looking at his plate. There was a single drop of condensation rolling down the side of his water glass, and he was watching it as though it was the most fascinating thing he had ever seen. He knew. I do not mean I suspected. I mean I knew he knew. The way you know your own reflection. The way you know your mother's voice on a bad phone line. The slope of his shoulders. The angle of his jaw. The absolute and damning stillness of his hands. He knew what was coming, and he had not warned me, and he was not stopping it. The sister was still going. Item 5, something about household management. Item 6, something about deferring to the family matriarch on matters of child-rearing and faith. Item 7, there was a 7. I do not remember 7. I think it was about Christmases. I think it was about how we would always do Christmases at their parents' house, and how I would be expected to arrive 2 days early to assist with preparation. The air in the ballroom became thin. I noticed I could hear the air conditioning, which I had not noticed before. I noticed the soft creak of someone shifting their weight on the ancient parquet floor. I noticed that the candles, the warm beeswax candles, were guttering slightly, as if a door had been opened somewhere I could not see. She finished. She folded the paper. She looked at me, and her smile had reached its full and terrible bloom. "We are so happy," she said, "to welcome you." There was a smattering of applause, not from everyone, not even from most, but from enough. From his parents at the next table, from the aunt, from a cousin in a navy suit, from a small, dense pocket of people who had clearly known this was coming and had been looking forward to it the way you look forward to a play whose ending you already love. I sat very still. I picked up my own champagne flute. I tapped it once, gently, with my own knife. The applause stopped. "Thank you," I said. My voice sounded calm. I do not know how. "Thank you for the warm welcome. I have a couple of questions, if that's all right." She nodded magnanimously. She thought I was going to ask for clarification. She thought I was going to negotiate. People like her always think the women they are crushing are going to negotiate. "First question," I said. "When you list these duties, the bookkeeping, the Sunday hosting, the scheduling of your parents' lives, are these things you understand to be optional and traditional in the sense of the new wife may choose to participate as she wishes? Or are you this evening in front of all of these people presenting them as conditions of the marriage?" She did not answer immediately. She blinked. I watched her recalibrate. I watched her try to figure out which answer would land. "They are," she said carefully. "What we expect." "Expect," I repeated. "From me specifically. From the woman who joins our family." "All right," I said. I took a small sip of my champagne. It tasted like nothing. I cannot remember what kind of champagne it was, and I had personally selected it 3 months earlier from a small vineyard outside Reims. "Second question." I turned deliberately to my fiancé. He finally looked up at me. His eyes were wide. He looked for the first time that night, fully present. "Did you know," I said quietly, "that this was going to happen tonight?" He opened his mouth. He did not speak. I waited. I let the silence become enormous. I let it fill the ballroom like rising water. I let it fill the ballroom like rising water. I let his parents notice it. I let his sister notice it. I let the aunt and the cousin and the pocket of people who had clapped notice it. I let our friends notice it. I let my own maid of honor, my college roommate, lock eyes with me from across the room with an expression of dawning horror. He still did not speak. Take your time, I said, and I think that is the moment I knew it was over. The moment I heard myself say, take your time, in a voice I have only ever used in boardrooms, and the seconds before I shut a deal down. The moment I realized I felt nothing for him except the very distant, very cold pity you feel for someone who has lost something they did not know they were holding. Yes, he finally said. I knew she was going to say something. I didn't know the whole list. I thought it was going to be lighter. I thought we could discuss it later. You know, the parts that worked and the parts that didn't. Discuss, I said. Yes. After we were married. Yes. I nodded. I set down my champagne flute. I looked at my hands, which were perfectly steady. This surprised me. I had expected them to shake. I had expected my whole body to shake. Instead, I felt the kind of clarity I associate with high altitudes, with the moment a plane breaks through cloud cover and the world below becomes a map. I'd like to say something, I said, to everyone. I stood up. I gathered the train of my dress in my left hand because it was very long and I needed to be able to walk, and I turned to face the room. Thank you all, I said, for coming tonight. Some of you flew in from very far. Some of you brought gifts I have not yet had the chance to open. Some of you, I'm realizing tonight, knew before I did what this evening was meant to be. I don't hold that against you. We all play the roles we're handed. I looked at my fiancé's mother, who was clutching her napkins so tightly her knuckles had gone white. There isn't going to be a wedding, I said. A sound went through the room. It was not a gasp. It was something quieter and worse. It was the sound of 60 people inhaling at the same time. I will not be assuming the duties that have just been described to me. I will not be deferring my career, my home, my body, or my time to any family except the one I choose to build with full and equal partnership. The man I was going to marry tonight knew this welcoming was coming, and he chose to let me walk into it blind. That is not a man I can marry. That is a man I cannot even sit next to right now. I turned to him. He was finally on his feet. Don't, he said. Please. Just let's go somewhere and talk. No, I said. We've talked enough. You knew and you let her. That's the whole story. I unhooked the diamond bracelet he had given me the morning of the wedding. I set it on the table next to my champagne flute. I left the ring. I cannot tell you why I left the ring. I think I wanted him to have to pick it up in front of everyone. I think I wanted that to be the last small humiliation he would have to perform in this room. My maid of honor will see that the gifts are returned, I said to the room. The vendors have been paid in full. Please enjoy the dinner. The cake, in particular, is excellent. And I walked out of the ballroom of the Drake Hotel in my Monique Lulea gown, alone, my heels echoing on the parquet, the string quartet completely silent now, the smell of peonies behind me, the cold air of the lobby ahead. The doorman, a man in his 60s named Henry who had been working at the Drake for 31 years, looked at me for 1 second and then very softly said, "Cab, miss?" "Yes, please." "Where to?" I had not thought about it. I had not thought past the words, "There isn't going to be a wedding." I stood there in the lobby in a $15,000 gown and tried to remember where my own house was. The brownstone. The brownstone I had bought. "Home," I said. "Astor Street." He hailed the cab. He helped me arrange the train so it would not catch in the door. He did not ask a single question. As the cab pulled away, he tipped his hat to me. I will think about Henry the doorman for the rest of my life. The drive was 4 minutes. I do not remember it. I remember unlocking my own front door in my wedding gown. I remember walking past the foyer mirror and not recognizing the woman in it. I remember sitting down on the bottom step of the staircase and only then, only when there was no one to see, beginning to cry. Not loudly. Not like a movie. The kind of crying that is mostly silent and mostly in the shoulders. The kind where you understand while it is happening that you are mourning something that you will not be able to fully name for a long time. The future sister-in-law had been living in my guest suite for 4 months. Her things were upstairs. A diffuser she had brought without asking. A small selection of her clothes. A pair of slippers by the bed. I went up the stairs in my gown. I gathered her things into a duffel bag I found in the closet. I carried the bag down to the foyer. I set it by the door. I texted her exactly one sentence: "Your belongings are in the foyer. The front door will be locked at midnight. The locksmith comes at 6 a.m. She called me 47 seconds later. I let it ring. I went into my own bedroom, the master bedroom of the house I owned, and I took off the gown. I hung it carefully on the back of the closet door. It had cost more than my first car. I did not cry over the dress. I have never cried over the dress. I think the dress was the one piece of that evening that was fully and only mine. I put on jeans, a cashmere sweater, sneakers. I put my hair up. I poured a glass of water from the kitchen tap and I drank it slowly, standing at the sink, looking out the window at the small back garden that I had landscaped myself 2 summers ago. I called my attorney. It was 9:47 on a Saturday night. He answered on the second ring, because that is what attorneys do when you pay them what I pay him. I called off the wedding, I said. I need a locksmith at 6 tomorrow morning. I need the brownstone retitled to confirm sole ownership, which it already is, but I want documentation on file. I need a record of every joint account and every shared subscription, all of which need to be closed by Monday close of business. The car in his name. I want the lease cancelled since I have been making the payments. The credit card that was opened in our names jointly last December, which has a 5-figure balance I have been carrying. I want it closed and a demand letter prepared. I'd like to meet Monday morning at 8. Muriel, he said. There was a long pause. Are you safe? Yes. All right. I'll be there at 8. I hung up. I sat on the kitchen counter in my own kitchen, in my own house, and I ate a piece of cold leftover pizza out of the refrigerator. It was the best thing I had eaten in months. The phone rang again, the future ex-sister-in-law. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. My fiancé. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. His mother. I blocked the number. Then I unblocked it because I wanted to see what they would do. Then I blocked it again because I realized I did not, in fact, need that information. By midnight, there were 19 missed calls. By 2 in the morning, there were 26. By the time the locksmith arrived at 6 a.m., a soft-spoken man named who introduced himself only by first name and who did not ask why a woman in a cashmere sweater needed all her locks changed at sunrise on a Sunday, there were 30. 30 missed calls. 22 voicemails. 41 text messages. I did not listen to any of them. I did not read any of them. I made a single screenshot of the call log, time-stamped, and I emailed it to my attorney for the file. Then I muted the phone. The locksmith finished at 7:15. I tipped him in cash. I made coffee. I sat in the bay window of my front parlor and I watched the morning come up over Astor Street, the soft gold light moving across the brownstones across the way, and for the first time in 7 months I felt my breath move all the way to the bottom of my lungs. The brownstone was mine. The retirement accounts were mine. The investments were mine. I had been the bank. I had been the one buying the wine and paying the lease on the German sports car he liked to drive on weekends. I had been the one quietly footing the bill for his sister's transitional period. I had been the one who had paid every single deposit for a wedding that, it turned out, was being designed not as a beginning, but as a transfer of services from one woman to the next, a kind of contract being drawn up over my head while I stood smiling for engagement photos in a Lincoln Park rose garden. The Monday morning meeting with my attorney lasted 3 hours. By noon, every shared account was closed. By Tuesday, the car had been collected by the leasing company from in front of the apartment my ex-fiancé had been keeping under his own name for the office. By Wednesday, a registered letter had been delivered to his parents' home in Lake Forest, formally requesting the return of a Cartier watch I had given him for his 34th birthday, which had been purchased through my personal accountant and which, per a clause in his prenuptial agreement that he had signed without reading carefully, reverted to me in the event the engagement was dissolved. He sent the watch back. He sent it back with a letter. The letter was 6 pages long. I read the first paragraph and I stopped reading. He used the phrase, "If you would only let me explain," in the 3rd sentence. There was nothing to explain. I knew everything I needed to know. His mother wrote to me twice. Long, careful letters on cream stationery in handwriting that looked like it had been practiced for these letters specifically. The first letter was an apology. The second letter 2 weeks later was not. The second letter contained the phrase, "You have humiliated our family," and I sat with that phrase for a long time, because I think it told me everything about what would have happened to me had I stayed. The humiliation, in their view, was not the welcoming. The humiliation was that I had refused it. I did not answer either letter. The sister moved out within 3 days. A friend with a pickup truck collected her belongings from the foyer at noon on Sunday. I was not home. I had driven up to a small inn on the bluffs above Lake Michigan, 2 hours north of the city, the kind of place with no cell service and a wood stove in every room. I had checked in on Saturday afternoon. The innkeeper, a woman in her 70s with a soft Wisconsin accent, asked if I was on my honeymoon. I said no. She did not ask anything else. She brought me a piece of warm peach pie at 5 o'clock that afternoon and left it outside my door without knocking. I stayed at the inn for 4 days. I walked the bluffs. I sat on a wooden bench that overlooked the lake, where the wind comes in cold off the water even in late spring, and I sat there for hours at a time, and I let the very large feeling inside my chest take whatever shape it needed to take. I did not name it. I did not fight it. I let it be what it was, which was something between grief and relief, and which kept rearranging itself like weather. On the fourth morning, very early, I walked to the edge of the bluff in the kind of damp gray pre-dawn light that makes everything look like a watercolor. There was a single freighter on the lake, miles out, moving slowly south. I watched it for a long time. I thought about the woman I had been 3 weeks earlier, the one who had been choosing peonies and writing thank you notes for engagement gifts and rehearsing a first dance in the living room of a brownstone she had been told to put in her own name for tax reasons. I did not feel sorry for that woman. I felt tender toward her, in the way you feel tender toward a younger sister who has not yet learned a thing you have learned. I had wanted to be married. I want to be honest about that. I had wanted very badly to be the woman who got the life I had been promised. I had loved him, not perfectly, not blindly, but in the way a person loves another person when she has decided that the partnership is the project and she is going to invest in it the way she invests in everything else, which is to say, completely. What I had not understood and what I understood now watching the freighter inch across the horizon was that some families do not see a wife. They see a position, a role that needs filling, and they were not unhappy with me. They did not know me. They were happy with the size of my paycheck and the management of my time and the use of my body and the dilution of my career and the absorption of their aging parents' financial and logistical and emotional needs into a younger woman with the energy to carry all of it. They had wanted a daughter-in-law the way some people want a good appliance. And the man I had loved had been raised to think this was love and had been unable in 7 months of engagement to summon the courage to tell me what was coming. The wind shifted. The sun came up behind the clouds, not directly, but as a slow brightening, the kind of sunrise that does not announce itself. I turned and walked back to the inn. The innkeeper had set out coffee in a thermos by the front door. I poured myself a cup. I sat in the wooden rocker on the porch. The phone, which I had turned back on that morning for the first time, had a message from my attorney. The brownstone was clean. The accounts were closed. The watch had been logged into evidence. There would be a short period of legal cleanup, but the worst of it was done. I read his message twice. I drank my coffee. I rocked. I did not get on social media. I did not post a single thing. I did not need to. I drove back to Chicago that afternoon. I let myself into my own house with my new keys. I opened all the windows. I changed the sheets on the bed. I lit a candle, a different candle, one that did not smell like the ballroom of the Drake. I made myself dinner, a real dinner, the kind I had not made in months because I had been so busy planning a wedding, and I ate it at my own kitchen table, alone, with the radio playing low. There was a baseball game on. I did not even like baseball. I let it play anyway. People sometimes ask me now whether I regret it. They ask carefully, the way you ask a widow about her marriage. I do not regret it. I regret the time I lost being someone's investment opportunity dressed up as someone's bride. I regret that I almost did not ask the second question. I regret a little that I left the ring on the table, because I think now I should have kept it and sold it and donated the proceeds to a women's shelter, which is what I would do today. But I do not regret the walking out. I do not regret the cab. I do not regret Henry the doorman or the locksmith or the inn on the bluffs or the 30 missed calls I never returned. I do not regret the letter I never wrote back to his mother, or the watch I took back, or the brownstone whose deed sits in a fireproof box in my closet, with my name and my name only on it. I have learned a few things since that night. I have learned that a man's silence at the worst moment of your life tells you more than any speech he could make in the best moment. I have learned that families who present a list of duties on a wedding day have been preparing that list for years, and the question is never whether they will use it, but whether you will read it carefully when they do. I have learned that the women they want are the women who do not ask questions, and that the simplest, sharpest weapon you will ever carry is the willingness to ask two of them in a room full of people who expected you to be quiet. I have learned that you can lose the wedding and keep the life. And I have learned that the door of your own house, when you unlock it with your own key on a Sunday morning that should have been your honeymoon, sounds different than every other door in the world. It sounds like a beginning. It sounds like the only beginning that was ever actually yours. I've thought about that night more times than I can count, and what I keep coming back to is this: nothing about what happened in that ballroom was sudden. The list his sister read out loud was not a surprise to anyone in that room except me. It had been written somewhere, in someone's handwriting, on someone's kitchen table, weeks or maybe months before I walked in wearing a gown I had picked out alone, because his mother had said she was too tired to come to the fittings. Every choice that family made, every silence my fiancé kept, every small request that seemed harmless at the time. Put the house in your name for tax reasons. Let my sister stay in the guest room while she gets back on her feet. Of course, we'll discuss the career stuff later. They were all bricks. And one by one, without me noticing, those bricks were being stacked into a wall I was supposed to wake up inside of. The reason I got out is not because I am strong. I want to be careful about that. People who hear this story sometimes tell me I am brave, and the word makes me uncomfortable because it isn't quite true. The reason I got out is because somewhere underneath the dress and the candles and the love I genuinely felt for the man I was about to marry, I had spent 10 years building a life I could actually stand in. I owned the brownstone. I had my own attorney on retainer. I had read the prenup. I had asked when I was 24 and buying my first investment property what it meant for a woman to keep her own name on a deed. These are not glamorous choices. They are quiet, patient, slightly paranoid choices that I made on weekday afternoons in conference rooms while my friends were planning vacations. And on the night I needed them, those choices were the floor under my feet. I think there is a real lesson here about the difference between being kind and being available for use. I had confused the two for a long time. I had thought that love meant letting people borrow more and more of you until there was nothing left to ask for. That family was the relationship where you weren't allowed to ask the second question. I don't believe that anymore. I believe now that the second question, "Did you know this was coming?" is the most loving thing a person can ask, because it gives the other person one last chance to be honest with you, and it gives you the truth you need to choose your own life. If you take anything from what I'm telling you, let it be this: pay attention to the silences. Pay attention to whose name is on what document. Pay attention to the family member who keeps just dropping by your house. And when the moment comes, and for some of you it will come, do not be afraid to set down the champagne glass, stand up in your beautiful dress, and walk out a door that you, yourself, have already made sure you own the key to.